How long should I study for the ARE 5.0 exams? What books do I need? Do I need the latest version? What score should I get on practice tests before I go take the real thing? And should I start with the case study? Hi, I'm Ben, this is Hyperfine. Today I'm covering these questions, which are some of the most common questions people ask me when they get started on their ARE prep. This might be long, so check the description for the timestamps below and some links to some other fun links and resources. But for now, let's get started. How long should I study for ARE 5.0 exams? Is 2 hours a night enough? Is 4 hours a day on the weekend enough? Is 5 weeks enough? The answer is you shouldn't really be studying or thinking about it in terms of hours or time. You got to be thinking about it in terms of outcomes and learning objectives. So don't say, okay, I'm just going to study 2 hours a night and then just open up black spectacles and do the videos and take some practice tests and then get 5 weeks down the road and get to your exam. What you want to do is spend, I'd say, a solid week researching the exam, whichever one you got coming up. Let's say you've got PCM. Spend a week on the NCARB forum, seeing what other people are studying and talking about the exam, leafing through the HPP, opening up the AA documents, reading your professional practice book, whatever resources you have. Start gathering resources, start thinking about and start learning what is on the exam, and thinking about the things that you want to learn to be confident on test day, and then think about how long it's going to take you to learn those. So generally, I think people are okay with studying maybe 4 to 5 weeks for PCM, and then taking PCM another 1 to 2 weeks down the road, so say 6 weeks for PCM and PJM combined. So think about what you want to learn, and then make sure you have a time for that scheduled every day from now to the next 4 or 5 weeks when you schedule your PCM exam. For me, I tended to study 90 to 120 minutes a night for an extended period of time, 4 to 8 weeks depending on the exam, which worked for me in terms of the time I had available and just what I think is the best way to study. You might be better off doing 30 minutes a night and then a huge chunk on the weekends. It's up to you, and as you go through these things, there's 6 exams. Don't be afraid to try something different and see if something different works for you. But I wouldn't necessarily worry about trying to hit an hours goal. You gotta think about things you actually want to learn and check those off your list more than the number of hours. It's it's the content that you are now trying to master to be confident enough to go in on test day. What books do I need? Do I need the most current version? With the exception of the Architect Handbook for Professional Practice, you don't need any specific book. I think the greater number of primary resources you have, these are the ones that are listed in the ARE 5.0 handbook, the greater number of those resources you have access to, the better. But you don't need any single one individual book to ensure success. You also don't need the latest version, and again, with the exception of maybe the IBC, which as of the time I'm recording this is on the 2018 version, and the AA contracts, which at the time I'm recording this are on the 2017 version. You don't need the latest book. An old copy will do. And when I was going through the exams, most of my books were out of date because I still had them from grad school, which was 4 years sort of before I was taking these exams. All right, so the reason you don't need the latest version is because these exams are really about concepts, fundamentals, and sort of solving problems. So what's not going to happen is you're not going to read a book, memorize an answer, and then see the same question on the test. So for example, here's my out-of-date architectural graphic standards. Let me see if I can get this focused. Right, so if you open up the section, for me it's page 481, and look at roof parapets, which I suggest you do, there's a dozen pages of parapet roof details. And so what you should do is go study roof parapet details and learn where the flashing goes and where the insulation goes and where the ballast goes and how do they protect the top of the wall and how do they protect the side of the wall, how does the roof, how does the ceiling join the wall, these kinds of things, right? So then when you get on PPD and PDD and invariably you have a question about parapet details and it's going to be a detail you've never seen before, if you looked at a dozen of them from architectural graphic standards, you'll probably be able to make a pretty good educated guess. But you're not trying to memorize every single leader and every single line from this book. So I've got the 12th edition. This is at least 1 or 2 editions out of date. I would be completely 100% perfectly fine studying for this for an ARE 5.0 exam. And you can sort of take that with any topic you want, right? pre-stressed concrete hasn't changed fundamentally in the last 2 years when a new Ching Building Construction Illustrated comes out. Or one-way or two-way slabs don't work any differently. There's not any brand new mechanical system that didn't exist 6 months ago that they're going to ask you about, right? Heat still moves through a building in fundamentally the same ways. Cold moves through the building fundamentally the same ways. You still need to exhaust heat. You still have to create hot and cold somewhere. You still got to get fresh air into a building. All these things are just fundamentals, and so it doesn't matter if you've got the first MEB ever, mechanical, electrical equipment for buildings. It doesn't matter if you have the first edition or the latest edition, they're all going to be just fine. Like I said, the only caveats to this are the IBC, which had some pretty significant changes from 2015 to 2018, and probably again when the exam ever updates to the 2021 version. So make sure you're studying from the latest code. Make sure you're studying from the latest version of the AA contracts, which had some changes between the 2007 and 2017 editions. Any other book, you're going to be perfectly fine. If you have it still laying around from school, it's perfectly good. As for what individual books you might need, I said the AHPP, the Architect's Handbook for Professional Practice, is probably the only single one that you really need because it's referenced on all 6 exams. But other than that, as long as you have something that teaches you in a way that you feel confident with about any subject, then it's probably fine. So some people have fundamentals of building construction, which I did. Some people have Ohlins. You don't need both of those. I really like heating, cooling, and lighting, plumbing, electricity, and acoustics. If you don't have those, but you do have MEB, then you're probably fine. As long as you're able to effectively use it to learn the topics, it's going to be fine. You don't need any one specific book. Usually, the consensus is that the student versions are not good enough, but if you have any edition of any of the true full books of any of these things, then you're probably going to be fine. What score do I need on my practice test to be ready for the real thing? I really don't think it matters. The further along I got into my exams and going from 4.0 to 5.0, by the end I wasn't even doing practice tests or even keeping score because it really doesn't matter. There's no real comparison with doing a practice test on your computer and then going into the real thing and dealing with like the stress of the time and wanting to pass in the testing center or the home proctoring and all that stuff. So if you're taking practice tests, I think it's better to understand the question and understand the answers, whether you got them right or wrong. So if you're faced with a question you don't understand, just pause the test, go try to find the answer, go try to learn that thing. It's more important that you learn that thing than guess on a practice test, right? Now, it can help to practice the actual format of the exam if this is maybe going to be your first exam or you struggle with the actual format. Black Spectacles has some full-length practice tests that are in the same exact format as the real exam, and I know NCARB has a practice test, or they might even have a full-length practice test now. And so if you want to learn the actual format and how to click through the case studies and stuff like that, maybe it can be beneficial. But in terms of getting a 60 or a 70 or 80 or a 90, your score on the practice test does not matter. Your time is better spent learning stuff than keeping score. Should I do the case study first? This is personal preference, but I would be very wary of doing the case studies first because they are a huge time suck and you can devote way more time to them than they're actually worth. So on ARE 5.0, every question is worth the same. You just have to get the right, you just have to get a certain amount right over the entire test to pass. You don't have to pass the multiple choice and the case study like it used to be in 4.0, right? So the case study questions are long, which you could make argument means that they're less valuable because it takes you more time per correct answer. I'll put a link to a post that I have, a post and a video about passing scores, and admittedly I need to update that information for the correct passing scores today, but the concepts I talk about in there are the same in that you just have to get to a certain amount. Maybe it's like 60 correct questions on an exam, and so your entire goal during that exam is to find 60 questions you can answer. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense to spend 5 to 10 minutes on a case study question if that's going to prevent you from answering 3 or 4 questions on the multiple choice question, on the multiple choice section, right? Because you just got to get to the certain number. Theoretically, you could entirely skip the case study and still pass the exam. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but I also would not recommend doing the case study first. Who are you and why should we listen to you? Is free advice on the internet? Do I need to have a qualification other than having a YouTube channel? So I'm Ben. I'm just a regular guy. I was taking my exams in 2017. I was a transition person, so I started in 4.0. I transitioned to 5.0. So I did all 5 exams in 2017. I didn't fail any. And as I was finishing my exams, I took PA, PPD, and PDD in 5.0, and it was the first year that these exams were out. So I wasn't an official early tester, but it was the first year. There was not a lot of study material, so my Kaplan book that said PPD on it was just a 4.0 study book with a new cover on it. It had a section on vignettes and everything. So as I was going through the exams and shortly after I was done, I was very active on the NCARB forum and answering questions, talking with other people, going through it at the same time as me, and then sticking around afterwards to answer questions about my experience, the kind of questions I saw, my recommendations for studying. And so I just kept getting more and more people asking me for tutoring and people asking me, what books did I use, what practice quizzes did I use, this kind of thing. At the same time, unrelated, I was in a transition between one job and then I happened to quit a second job and work for myself, and that's a whole different story. But I had built this website, Hyperfine, to provide Revit training, and that's a whole other story. And so I started, I had this website, I was trying to make content for it, and I was like, oh, maybe people who are interested in ARE exams will also be interested in Revit content. So in addition to the Revit content, I started posting some of my thoughts on the ARE and these things that I was answering in the forum. I just started answering in blog forum and YouTube forum on my website. And so then I just got more and more people reaching out to me for tutoring and all these different questions. And I was like, well, I'm not the best at tutoring. I did well in the exams because I am good at exams and I know how to study. And that's how I can help you more than teaching you what's in the IBC. I can teach you to sort of read the IBC for yourself. And so I started writing these assignments for a small group of people. And then that turned into an actual ARE 5.0 study product. And then from there, I built more of them, and now we're here.